Hello, everybody. So yesterday's crash really increased my confidence in strategy even more than where it already was. You know, this is my number one position in the portfolio. It saved me yesterday. The portfolio is still down, but not nearly as down as it would have been without strategy. And so this is all about the Bitcoin black hole and the MicroStrategy black hole and how well it performed compared to TradFi. That's the story of today. And I'm mostly going to talk about Bitcoin and MicroStrategy today, a little bit about TradFi, but mostly MSTR in today, because you can see MicroStrategy was up 4% yesterday on a day where for the second day in a row, we had NASDAQ and S&P drawdowns around the 5%. So you can see it's almost 6% for both of them. Note yesterday the S&P 500 dropped almost 6%. It dropped more than the NASDAQ. The week for this traditional asset for TradFi has been awful because the S&P lost 8% and 8% for the NASDAQ on a weekly level. This is a pretty insane drop if you ask me. TradFi is ill. Why is TradFi ill? Well, my belief is that indexes have killed TradFi because people just sell the index. They just sell the entire market, and so many of this channel's favorite stocks are getting dumped, even though we don't deal very little. We almost have no companies that deal with physical goods, like next to none. This is complete nonsense. So many of our stocks have been battered, but not MicroStrategy. So point number one is I believe all stocks should be available to everyone, everywhere, anytime in the future with full ownership in the form of a token. Right now, U.S. stocks, they're not that. They're exclusive. You know, they're mostly for U.S. investor. They're harder to get in foreign countries, right? In Europe, there's a lot of fees in most brokers. You know, they're harder to get once you're bought. It's not like a token. Anybody can buy a token. Not anybody can buy U.S. stocks. There's minimum limits. The U.S. stocks, they need to be freed. They need to trade on crypto rails, on digital finance rail, on DeFi, on DEXs, on blockchain. That technology is growing and is growing fast. And sure enough, some viewers of the channel are invested in blockchains like Solana and Sui to make a bet on this. But this is not ready for prime time, right? U.S. stocks being listed internationally, available everywhere to everybody. That's not yet there. But we have one thing that is there already. That is the digital commodity that is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has won the digital commodity game. Sure, you still have a little bit of Dogecoin and some forks of Bitcoin, but they are meaningless in the grand scheme of things compared to Bitcoin. Bitcoin won the digital commodity game, and that digital commodity is available to everybody, every day, everywhere. This is much tougher to manipulate, right? You can't place a trade in a dark pool before the market opens. You can't do shenanigans on the weekends while retail is not able to touch stocks and do your whole shadow exchanges of stocks. The manipulation is big in Bitcoin, and sure enough, people who only cover Bitcoin complain about that, but it's nowhere nearly as big as it is in TradFi. May I remind you how many trillions of dollars have been wiped out in the traditional market over the past 2 days? It's been pretty insane. MicroStrategy, as I've called it before, is a two-legged animal. It's got one leg in TradFi and one leg in digital finance, digital fi, and that's Bitcoin. And that Bitcoin side of, you have a stock on the one side and then the Bitcoin held by the stock of MSTR on the other side. That's the receiving end of the balance sheet. This stock brought tremendous security yesterday to anybody who had it on the portfolio. Look at this beautiful performance again, plus 4%. Let's move on to some wisdom and let's talk about what's going on with Bitcoin. So, of course, Saylor talks about how the reaction to tariff is just one of the many problems with stocks. Stocks, you have tariffs, of course, but you have taxes, you have regulation, you have competition, you have obsolescence, you have unforeseen events. That's why stock picking is difficult. You gotta pick the company that is going to outperform all of these risks, that is going to handle all of these risks. Bitcoin offers resilience in a world of risk. Bitcoin is just money. It's neutral money. It's just something that you own, right? Peter Diamandis, another author that I admire, read his books about the future are absolutely outstanding. In times of fear, buy Bitcoin. In times of prosperity, buy Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin is money. And then this is Saylor again, this last bit of wisdom, telling us about the volatility. Because Bitcoin is volatile, it is the most useful asset because you can sell it anytime, you can buy it anytime, and oftentimes in the very short run, sometimes just a matter of hours, it's the thing that will dump first because somebody sees risk somewhere on the horizon, but it recovers faster than the rest as well because it's the first thing that gets bought back. My 2 cents on Bitcoin and the role of Bitcoin in the future. Here's my 2 cents. If Bitcoin is money in the future, which I firmly believe Bitcoin will be money in the future. It will be international, neutral, freely available money. That's why Saylor says you want your enemies to adopt Bitcoin, and you want to adopt Bitcoin too, right? It's not the case for the US dollar. The US does not allow its enemies to use the USD. Bitcoin is neutral. It's a commodity. It's like gold. If that Bitcoin is money, the better gold, the gold 2.0, then it makes sense that MicroStrategy would be one of the first big companies or the next-gen big tech. It would be one of the next-gen big tech companies to be actually built on money. And the value proposition of Bitcoin, of course, would be that of a Bitcoin bank, private equity provider, you name it. But it would be somewhere related to the financialization, to the financial sector, built on top of Bitcoin. In many ways, MicroStrategy, if Bitcoin is money in the future, in many ways, MicroStrategy would be the JP Morgan of Bitcoin. There's another company that's very big in this space, and it's Coinbase. And I'm only taking the most salient companies in the market, right? The 50 billion plus market cap companies in that market. Coinbase is an exchange, right? So in the TradFi, the equivalent would be something like the New York Stock Exchange or Intercontinental Exchange, which is a publicly traded company you can buy, or even the NASDAQ company, right? Coin is an exchange. It's a stock built on Bitcoin too. Coin is built on Bitcoin. MicroStrategy is built on Bitcoin. These companies are built on money. Bitcoin is money. If Bitcoin is money, companies that are built on money should outperform companies that are built on fiat, because fiat is a melting ice cube. Bitcoin is not. And here's the thing: there's business risks on top of Bitcoin, right? So when you buy MicroStrategy or Coinbase, for example, you're taking on business risks in addition to Bitcoin, to money. So you're buying money. You're buying a money derivative, right? MSTR or coin is a money derivative. It is riskier, but it has the potential, given astute management, assuming you're able to select the company built on Bitcoin with astute management. It is possible that it outperforms Bitcoin itself, but Bitcoin is the baseline. On the other hand, a business that is not built on Bitcoin, a business that is built on fiat, the business risks are there to try to outpace the demise of fiat. In other words, a business built on fiat has to be truly exceptional if it wants to have hope to beat the debasement of fiat. The point I'm trying to make here is that an average firm that uses money, i.e. Bitcoin, may outperform the best firm that uses fiat. And this is what Saylor tweeted the other day. The delta now between NVIDIA and MicroStrategy is widening. A few months ago, MicroStrategy was barely better performing than NVIDIA. Today, the delta is much bigger because NVIDIA, being part of the market, NVIDIA being both legs in TradFi, got hit entirely. MSTR has one leg in DigitalFi, which did not get hit. And that is the beauty of MSTR. And to be honest, I cannot imagine being a CEO of a beaten down company right now and trying to wrap your head around it. Like I get it. If you're like the CEO of RH and you manufacture furniture in Vietnam, I understand, and you should understand. But what does HIMS have to do with it? Pharmaceuticals are not impacted by tariff, and even if they were, they make their stuff in the US with US labs and US compound pharmacies. What does HIMS have to do with it? HIMS is down 18%. What does Robinhood have to do with it? Robinhood is down 20%. Robinhood is just a modern day US broker. It makes absolutely no sense. And even worse too, what does the trade desk have to do with it? The trade desk is down 20%. And look at the charts of these stocks. They follow the exact same pattern. Look at that first dip shortly after April SUCH here. Exactly the same. Short dip, back up, short dip, back up, short dip, back up. The market is making no distinction between these companies. It's punishing these companies just because they are companies. As a CEO, I feel for them. I feel like it is easy to become become very upset as a CEO and become feeling like your job is meaningless because you work so hard and the stock dumps on things that have nothing to do with you. And if you remember MicroStrategy in the early days, in the 2020s, it was this beating down that led MicroStrategy to adopt Bitcoin as a defensive strategy because MicroStrategy was being dumped while Microsoft, Nvidia, Facebook were being pumped because of the nature of index funds. The top company in the market is being pumped by the market as the flows get back in. What happens if you were a company, back then MicroStrategy was 600 million, what if you were a 600 million company? How much of those new flows do you really get? You get stuck at the bottom. These index funds become very punishing. That was the offensive iteration to buy Bitcoin. And now, of course, as we well know, Saylor has moved into an offensive iteration of Bitcoin. You remember my chart from a black hole. MicroStrategy is a way to get TradFi to invest in Bitcoin without them knowing it. They issue common stock, included in the QQQ, for example. In the case of MicroStrategy, they issue preferred, they issue bonds. If anything proved yesterday and the day before is that the market loves preferred, loves bond. The market loves these, and I hope bond investors, if you watch this video, I hope you won't be upset, but they love these dumb assets. MicroStrategy is calling the bluff. MicroStrategy is selling these assets, refining these assets, as Saylor says, and selling these fiat derivatives to fiat junkies who don't have an hour in the day to study Bitcoin. And of course, those fiat junkies, they get the common stock, okay? That's the least toxic part of the MSTR story, even though it still has that one leg in it, and it still reacts to macro more than Bitcoin, right? The converts, the preferred, soon to come the regular bonds, I still believe. It's a provider of these fiat derivatives, and whenever it sells one of these fiat derivatives, Saylor just turns around and buys Bitcoin with it. That is the beauty of this scenario. And I will conclude with this. The great fiat bluff is called into question, in my view, with days like yesterday. Days like yesterday are calling into question the fiat bluff, because what do trillions mean? What is a trillion of fiat? What does it mean to have a trillion if we don't know how many trillions there are out there? And this is why the channel is named Beat the Denominator. We know yesterday that 2.85, that was 2 days ago, and yesterday 3.25 trillion. You know, we know that this money was wiped out, but we have no idea of the scale. We don't really know the scale because nobody knows exactly how many dollars there are out there. We have estimates, right? Traders will come up with fancy metrics like global M2, US-based M2, only in the financial system. But we really don't know how many dollars there are out there. Is it 50 trillion? Is it 60 trillion? People estimate. But even the delta between the high end of the estimate and the low end of the estimate, you know, is huger than say how we appreciate the top 5 or top 10 companies in the US market. This makes very little sense because we don't have an idea of how many dollars there are out there, how much fiat there is out there. We don't know. But more importantly, fiat has no cap. It has no cap. And it never gets destroyed because people, when they get on debt, they get hooked and they want to get on more debt. So anyways, I'll conclude with this. NVIDIA is worth 2.3 trillion. 2.3 trillion, what does that mean? It's 2.3 trillion out of an unknown amount of fiat. We have no idea how much fiat there are out there. So the fraction, it's 2.3 trillion out of how much? How many dollars are there out there? We don't know. MSTR on the other end is worth 528,000 Bitcoin out of 21 million Bitcoin, right? MSTR is worth nearly 5% of the money supply. NVIDIA, the stock market, you have no way to know how much of the money supply is it worth. And so in this context, I ask, you see a price tag on MSTR of 77 billion. Does this 77 billion price tag mean anything? 77 billion out of question mark. We don't know how many dollars are out there. So maybe it's time for us to value MSTR only looking at Bitcoin and how many Bitcoin they have. It's 528,000 Bitcoin. That's what MSTR is. And each share should be perhaps quoted in how much Bitcoin there is in MSTR and not really quoted in a random price in fiat that is more dependent on macro factors, that is more dependent on how much fiat there is, rather than is dependent on actual value. And so this is the conclusion of my video. I'm loving MicroStrategy much more than I already is. And I think I'm going to increase my position in this stock, even though it's already my number 1 position. And yesterday reinforced my conviction greatly. So this was not financial advice. This was not investment advice. This is only entertainment. Hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful, wonderful day.